Pumpkin Dreams in Texas Sunday. The Texas sun beat down on Billy Joe's neck as he trudged between the rows of colossal pumpkins. Each step kicked up dust devils that danced in the shimmering heat. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dirt that only made him look more like a miniature version of Grandpa McCoy. He reached the first pumpkin, a behemoth the size of a small pony, its skin a deep, vibrant orange. Billy Joe knelt, his calloused fingers tracing the smooth, curving surface. He remembered Grandpa saying this one had the potential to break records at the county fair this year. Gotta keep 'em watered, Billy Joe, Grandpa had rasped that morning, his eyes twinkling. Thirsty pumpkins ain't prize-winning pumpkins. He adjusted the makeshift irrigation system, a network of repurposed garden hoses and strategically placed tin cans. The water trickled out, soaking the dry earth around the pumpkin's base. He moved on to the next, admiring its perfect, symmetrical shape. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, a giant's discarded toy. The county fair was only weeks away and the pressure was on. These pumpkins weren't just a hobby, they were a tradition, a point of pride for the McCoy family and a small but vital source of income. Plus, Billy Joe knew how much Grandpa loved showing off his hard work. He glanced towards the ranch house, a speck of white against the vast, golden landscape. Grandpa was probably inside, escaping the worst of the afternoon heat. Billy Joe smiled, picturing him in his rocking chair, sipping iced tea and plotting his next move. He felt a surge of determination. He wouldn't let Grandpa down. These pumpkins would be the biggest, the brightest, and the best the county had ever seen. He just hoped those city cops kept their distance. Roar of the OA police. The dust devils Billy Joe had been chasing evaporated as a roar ripped through the morning calm. Not the contented bellow of a bull, but a high-pitched whine that spoke of strained metal and reckless speed. Tires chewed gravel as a black and white OA police SUV careened onto the McCoy ranch, fishtailing wildly before straightening out with a lurch that sent a flock of startled crows scattering from the cottonwoods. Billy Joe froze, his small hands still clutching the rope he'd been using to lasso imaginary cattle. He squinted, shielding his eyes from the sun glinting off the SUV's windshield. Nobody ever came barreling onto the ranch like that. Especially not the law. A knot of unease tightened in his stomach. Had Grandpa done something? The SUV screeched to a halt, kicking up another cloud of dust that swirled around Billy Joe's ankles. The driver's side door swung open with unnecessary force and a large man in a tan uniform unfolded himself from the vehicle. A name tag above his breast pocket read Perkins, but Billy Joe already knew who it was. Officer Dale Donut Perkins. He'd seen him at the Piggly Wiggly buying enough glazed pastries to feed a small army. Perkins slammed the door shut, the sound echoing across the quiet pasture, and began swaggering towards the house, his face set in a grimace that promised trouble. Donuts of disrespect. The screech of tires tore through the afternoon quiet, a sound so jarring it made Billy Joe drop the wrench he was using to fix the south fence. He straightened, squinting toward the lane. A black SUV, mud-splattered and official-looking, fishtailed onto the field, kicking up dust and bits of dried grass. Then came the laughter. High-pitched, almost gleeful, bouncing off the barn. The SUV, now spinning in tight circles, churned the already dry earth into a pulverized mess. Tire tracks, black and angry, began to mar the green. Billy Joe's gut clenched. He started walking, then running toward the ruckus. As he got closer, he saw them, two uniformed officers, one hanging halfway out the passenger window, hooting. It was Officer Perkins, the one with the perpetual grimace, and another he didn't recognize. Perkins was behind the wheel, his face split by a wide, almost feral grin. They were doing donuts. Right in the middle of Grandpa's best pasture. The smell of burnt rubber stung Billy Joe's nostrils. His eyes burned as he watched the SUV careen dangerously close to the pumpkin patch, the one Grandpa had been tending since spring. He could practically taste the dirt swirling in the air. He balled his fists. The laughter felt like a personal insult. He had helped seed that field. He'd pulled weeds under the summer sun until his back ached. Every inch of that land was earned. Every blade of grass held a memory. And these city boys were treating it like their personal playground. A knot formed in his throat, tight and hot. Grandpa's thunder. The barn door groaned open, the sound echoing across the suddenly silent yard. Billy Joe froze, the half-eaten apple in his hand forgotten. Grandpa emerged, not with his usual slow, deliberate steps, but with a purpose that radiated like heat off the summer asphalt. His face, usually a roadmap of wrinkles etched by laughter and sunshine, was set in granite. The lines were deeper, sharper, and his eyes, normally crinkled at the corners, were now narrowed slits. Billy Joe had seen that look before, usually reserved for stubborn mules or politicians on the television. It was Grandpa's thunder face, the one that meant a storm was brewing and you'd best find yourself some shelter. Officer Dale Donut Perkins, halfway to the porch, swaggering like he owned the place, faltered. The grimace plastered on his face tightened. He hadn't seen Grandpa yet, focused as he was on the house. Grandpa didn't say a word. He just stood there, a silent sentinel, his presence heavier than the humid air. Billy Joe swallowed, the apple suddenly tasting like sawdust. He knew, with a certainty that settled in his gut, that the donut-munching officer was about to learn a lesson in McCoy hospitality. A lesson that wouldn't be taught with sweet tea and front porch rocking chairs. A polite warning ignored. Jedediah McCoy watched from the porch swing as the two officers poked around the pumpkin patch, their shadows long in the late afternoon sun. He'd already brewed a pot of chamomile, hoping to stave off the inevitable headache. He stepped off the porch, his boots crunching softly on the gravel path. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said, his voice mild. "Appreciate you looking into things, but I reckon you've seen all there is to see. Time you were heading on." The taller of the two, Donut Perkins, didn't turn. He snorted, kicking at the base of a prize-winning gourd. "Just admiring the landscaping, old-timer." "Landscaping's done," Jedediah said, his voice hardening just a fraction. "Consider this a polite request." Perkins finally turned, a smirk plastered on his face, revealing a fleck of powdered sugar clinging to his mustache. "Polite requests don't carry much weight around here, Pops. We're conducting an investigation." He gestured dismissively at the churned-up earth. The other officer, younger and visibly uncomfortable, shuffled his feet. Perkins, emboldened by his partner's unease, took another step, his heavy boot connecting with a sickening thud against the side of a particularly large pumpkin. A spiderweb crack spread across its orange surface. "Evidence collection," Perkins announced, his eyes twinkling with malice. He ground his heel into the dirt, sending a spray of soil onto the damaged pumpkin. "Wouldn't want any contamination." Bessie's resolve. Grandpa didn't say a word. He simply turned and headed toward the barn, his gait suddenly younger, firmer. The metallic clunk of the tractor's ignition switch echoed across the yard. A grinding, protesting whine followed, then a cough, a sputter, and finally the deep-throated roar of Bessie coming to life. Bessie. More rust than paint, held together by baling wire and sheer stubbornness. She'd been Grandpa's father's tractor, a beast built for war and then repurposed for peace, a relic of a time when steel was steel and men were men. She vibrated with pent-up energy, a slumbering giant now awake and ready to work. Officer Perkins, mid-belly laugh, paused. "What in the—" He squinted toward the barn, a half-eaten donut still clutched in his hand. Officer Miller, wiping tears from his eyes, turned as well. Their laughter died in their throats, replaced by a dawning unease. Bessie lumbered out of the barn, a cloud of black smoke billowing behind her. The ground trembled with each chugging step. Grandpa sat ramrod straight, his face set like granite, a glint of steel in his eye that had nothing to do with the setting sun. He adjusted his cap, the brim casting a shadow over his face, obscuring his intentions. The only sound now was the relentless, rhythmic thump of Bessie's engine, growing louder, closer, more menacing with each passing second. Chain of events. Grandpa moved with a deliberation that belied the fire in his eyes. He produced a heavy chain from the back of Bessie, the tractor, its links thick and blackened with grease. He looped one end around the SUV's tow hitch, securing it with a practiced flick of the wrist. The other end he fastened to Bessie's reinforced drawbar. The tractor rumbled, impatient. Officer Perkins, still chuckling with his partner, hadn't noticed Grandpa's approach. "Hey, Earl, remind me to bring donuts next time. This place is a riot." Grandpa climbed onto Bessie, the seat groaning under his weight. He adjusted his cap, its brim casting a shadow over his face. He engaged the gears. Bessie shuddered, then strained. The chain went taut, singing a low, mournful note. The SUV didn't budge at first. Then, with a protesting screech of tires on dry grass, it lurched. An inch. Another inch. The laughter died in Perkins' throat. "Hey! What the—" He sputtered, scrambling to his feet. "What do you think you're doing, old man?" Bessie kept pulling. The SUV was moving, slowly but inexorably, towards the muddy bank of the pond. Small stones kicked up, pinging against the undercarriage. The pond water, usually still and reflective, rippled with anticipation. Perkins' face was a study in disbelief morphing into outright panic. Plunged. The chain tightened, biting deeper into the mud. Officer Perkins, still behind the wheel, revved the engine again, tires spinning uselessly. He was sweating, his face a blotchy red. Donut residue clung stubbornly to his mustache. From the corner of his eye, he saw his partner, Jenkins, frantically waving his arms, yelling something he couldn't quite make out over the engine's roar. Grandpa McCoy stood motionless on the bank, a dark silhouette against the fading light. His face was unreadable, but there was a grim satisfaction in the set of his shoulders. He gave a barely perceptible nod. Suddenly, the SUV lurched forward, finally finding purchase. But instead of pulling free, it slid sideways, its front wheels finding the slick, muddy edge of the pond. Perkins yelped, slamming on the brakes. Too late. With a sickening crunch and a drawn-out screech of metal, the SUV tipped, its nose dipping into the murky water. For a heart-stopping moment, it teetered on the brink, then plunged. A geyser of muddy water erupted, followed by the sickening gurgle of air escaping as the vehicle sank beneath the surface. Silence descended, broken only by the croaking of frogs and the distant drone of insects. Perkins and Jenkins stood dumbfounded, water dripping from their uniforms, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock and disbelief. The only visible part of the SUV was the antenna swaying gently like a submerged reed. Grandpa McCoy remained on the bank, a silent sentinel watching the water settle. Justice in the mud. Grandpa unhitched Bessie from the chain, the metal clinking softly in the morning air, a stark contrast to the squelching and cursing emanating from the pond. He patted Bessie's flank, a silent thank you, then turned and walked back towards the pumpkin patch. He didn't spare a glance for the two officers floundering waist-deep in muddy water, their faces mirroring the murky depths. Billy Joe watched them, fascinated. Officer Perkins, still clutching a half-eaten donut, looked like a bewildered walrus. The other one just looked plain miserable. "Grandpa, aren't you gonna help them?" Billy Joe asked, already knowing the answer. Grandpa just grunted, surveying his pumpkins. "They'll figure it out." He pointed to a bare patch of earth near a prize-winning giant. "Best get to planting some new grass there, Billy Joe. Good soil's too precious to waste." By noon, the story was all over town. Martha at the diner was practically singing it as she flipped burgers, the aroma of grilled beef mingling with the excited chatter. Old Man Hemlock, who hadn't cracked a smile in 20 years, was seen chuckling to himself on Main Street. Every car that passed the McCoy ranch honked its horn in solidarity. Billy Joe, his hands covered in dirt, planted the last seed. He imagined the new grass, strong and green, a testament to Grandpa's quiet justice. He heard another cheer erupt from the direction of town. He smiled. Some messes, he thought, just needed a little mud to make things right.